since we'd just done Prominent Women of Towns County last year, so I thought, well, we could do some prominent men from Towns County, or men to match the mountains. And so the ones we do tonight aren't necessarily the brightest and the best. And they're not necessarily all of them. However, it's the ones that I could pick out and find a little information on. So they're from Towns County, or came to Towns County, and they had great influence.
So our first one that we're going to start with is, excuse me for the light, it's very dark up here. First one we're going to start with is General James R. Wiley. He was born in 1782, and many of y'all may remember the Wiley House that's set up on the river. He married Sarah Harkins Clark, who was the granddaughter of General John Sevier of Tennessee. He was a state commissioner for the state of Georgia, where he worked to improve the navigation of the Savannah and the Tougaloo rivers. He was a sheriff of Franklin County, Georgia for 12 years. A captain under Major Benjamin Cleveland in the Creek Campaign of the War of 1812, and colonel of the Habersham County Militia from 1828 to 1834. He later went on to own a house near Toccoa, many of y'all may know it, known as Traveler's Rest, which was a stagecoach inn which is now restored and owned by the state of Georgia and kept as a museum. He began to build a series of these houses along the Unicoi Turnpike, which ran from the northeast Georgia to Tellico Plains in Tennessee. So the old brick house that you see here on the screen was the one that was here in Towns County. It's set up on the river next to Mount Zion Baptist Church. And it was one of the houses that he built. And if it was still standing today, it would be the oldest house still standing in Towns County. But unfortunately, it did burn back in the 70s.
I think.
He was a major stockholder in the Unicoi Turnpike, and the road was even labeled as Wiley's Road. A map that was made in the area in the 1830s at the time that the Indians were removed. When he moved to Towns County, he resided here in this home near the head of the river, and it was noted that he was an influential citizen. By the 1850 census, it was documented that he owned 16 slaves, and he also encouraged many of his Habersham County neighbors to settle here following the Cherokee removal, including the Taylor family. And once here, he aided them until they were sufficiently established. He donated the land that's used for the Mount Zion Methodist Episcopal Church South, now known as Mount Zion Baptist Church. The executors of his estate sold the brick house and the property to my ancestors, the Ezekiel Brown family, and it has remained in that family ever since.
Okay. Turn up John Johnson. People today probably never heard of Colonel John M. Johnson, but John M. Johnson was a force in Towns County and in the state of Georgia. He was born here in 1870, and he gained his education at Hiawassee Academy and Young Harris College. And that education here in Towns County enabled him to fly high. By profession, he was a lawyer. He and his wife, Hetty, made their home at the corner of Bell and Main Street, which would be where Glenn Eller's business is. And also, the post office was in their house, the Hiawassee Post Office. He was elected ordinary, they call it commissioner now, in 1904, and he remained in that office till 1922, being the longest term commissioner or ordinary ever in Towns County. In 1909, he was elected president of the Good Roads Committee. He was all about good roads, faster and better transportation. That was the thing back then. They were for good roads. Today, they kind of not favor of good roads. They don't want those people coming. But back then, they wanted in and out, and so he was the chairman of the Good Roads Committee, and the goal of that committee was to connect Blue Ridge to Clayton. The reason for that was a railroad went through Blue Ridge, and a railroad went through Clayton. And his idea was that if he could connect those two railroad points through Union and Towns, it would bring up life out of the Middle Ages for Hiawassee and Blairsville. It never happened, though. In 1919, he was promoting and a member of the committee for the Nacoochee-Hiawassee Railroad over Unicoi Gap. Well, needless to say, that didn't happen either. But he was all about good roads. Locally, in his political job as commissioner, or ordinary, he was responsible for the building of the 1915 jail that stood where the Garden Club building is on River Street in Hiawassee. Okay, so we got a new jail. See, they had just got a new courthouse in 1900, so he got the new jail. Also, he was responsible for the modern steel bridge over Hiawassee River at Hog Creek, known as the Birch Bridge. He was also responsible for the modern steel bridge on River Street near the Hedden Mill, which went over the mill pond there. And so those bridges stayed there till the lake came. And the Birch Bridge was dismantled and moved to Altown in Union County. And they called it the Hedden Bridge up there on River Street. The Hedden Bridge was dismantled and moved to Kelly Lane up on Street Hill, Kelly Lane way. And both of them, they're gone now. I checked at the Union County one the other day when I went to Smoking Q, and it's not there anymore. And of course, the Kelly Bridge up here is gone. Following his wife Hetty's tragic drowning in the mill pond in 1919, he resigned as ordinary, packed up his bags, and went to Atlanta to work as a lawyer. He lived at 886 Arlington Place. That sounds like a prestigious address. He was active in the local and state Republican Party, being a candidate for Congress on the Republican side many times. However, in that day and time, Republicans weren't as plentiful as they are now, so he never got elected. In 1922, he was appointed United States District Attorney, and he was from here. In 1924, he married Minnie Lucille Mentor of Monticello, Georgia, who was the only female assistant district attorney south of the Mason-Dixon line. So the two of them together were the only couple who were both assistant district attorneys at the same time in the same office. In 1934, he moved his office to Gainesville, and 12 years later, he returned to Atlanta and joined the firm Hager and Kemp. On a return visit to Hiawassee on August the 23rd, 1954, he was tragically killed in a car wreck somewhere in Hiawassee. He's buried in Osborn Cemetery.
Now this next one, if you have not heard me talk about him before, you haven't been coming to enough meetings. So Jesse Miles Barone, he was born here in 1860 here in Towns County, where he received his primary education and completed that literary education in 1878 at the Tallulah Academy over in Clayton. After teaching school for several years, he was engaged in merchandising at Burton and also at Clayton, which he continued there for several years as well. After that, for a few years, he followed engaging in farming near Hayesville, and then he came back to Hiawassee, where he opened up a general store and began operating that as well. And that primarily became his main business. He also was a large landowner as well, and he had some business and some mining operations here in the county as well. Quoting from his biography and Memoirs of Georgia, he is a man of strong and forceful personality, very energetic and persevering, and whatever he undertakes, he does with all his might. Add to these characteristics a pleasing address, affability, and courteousness, and the product is a man of influence likely to secure any office of distinction. He is a striking type of class of young men to the front in Georgia and the South who will control the future of the state. He is already a conspicuous figure in politics of his section and makes his influence felt. He is ardent, working Democrat, a recognized leader, has frequently represented the county in Democratic conventions, and is prominent in the councils of the party in Northeast Georgia. As a partial recognition of his merit and services, he was appointed May 1893 United States Commissioner at Hiwassee, an office he incredibly and acceptably filled and retains. Now, in addition to that, he also served as our state representative here for Towns County, and he had a lot of influential down in the Atlanta area. And one of the biggest things that he did that I would say is he is the reason we have a state highway that runs through Towns County. He worked to get the state highway brought up through highway, I think 515. Yeah, 515 that runs up through here. He was one, and they had a big celebration when it opened. And in addition to that as well, if you have not heard me talk about it, the reason, his house sits in downtown Hiwassee, and it's the house that we are restoring, the Bronx Oakley house. And there's more information in the back on that as well. He did pass away in 1939, and he is buried here in town in the Osborn Cemetery.
Well, one that has particularly intrigued me, I found out about him some time ago, but I've researched him the best I can, and he was the Reverend John Gordon Logan. As you look at him, you can probably tell that he's a mixed race person. He was the grandson of Louis Logan, and the Logan house, turn it, go one. The Logan house, you might recognize. Yeah? Okay, do another one. Yeah? The house at Brothers Restaurant, that's the original Logan house. And this part right here was the cabin. It was a small cabin. All that was added on. It was built around 1847. When Louis Logan came here. John Gordon Logan was an orphan. Both of his parents had died. He was raised by his grandfather, Louis Logan, who died in 1886, I think. So here he was, about 14 or 15 or so, and nobody. Young Harris College started that same time. And that kid, instead of going and playing video games or something, he walked down to Young Harris and enrolled in the very first class, the first day at Young Harris College. And that saved him. That saved him. An education saved him. The great revivals and unusual religious influence at Young Harris in those days had a marked influence on him. And his fine voice mingled in songs and prayers and testimonies, and he answered the call to be a pastor. He was licensed at Young Harris in 1895 and ordained in 1899. And some of the places he served, some of the places where the Methodist Church sent him to serve was Blue Ridge, and also at Young Harris College as a professor. Roswell, Hogansville, Toccoa, Sparta, West Point, Covington, Cartersville, Elberton, Newnan, Carrollton, Gainesville, Martha Brown in Atlanta, Marietta, Thomaston, Trinity at Rome, Hartwell, and he was at Trinity at Hartwell when he got sick and couldn't finish out the year, and he retired in 1937 after 42 years being a circuit rider. Uh, at Young Harris, he met and married May Swindoll from LaGrange, and they had 5 children. Now, coming up the way he did here, you can imagine, coming up the way he did here, he wanted his children to have an education. And so he put an education on them whether they wanted it or not. His oldest son, John, went to school locally, and then he continued his education at some school in Wisconsin. And the school in Wisconsin, I forgot the name of it, but it was a prestigious school. The school in Wisconsin got a group together to go to Greece, to the American and British school. So they go, John goes with them. I don't know how long they were supposed to stay. But while they were in Greece, here's the report from the United States government, or the Greece government. It said, the deceased, that's John, who was in Greece with the students, received the gunshot wounds that caused, is this too loud? Am I? No. Okay. The deceased, that's John, the kid, received the gunshot wounds that caused his ultimate death while in an automobile coursing the high road between Arta and Janina in Greece with a company of members of the American and British school in Athens. That's Athens, Greece. The shots were fired by an unknown person. The motive for the crime has so far not been determined. And, that was written by J.T. Gilman, the Vice Consul of the United States of America, in a report. So John was the oldest kid. He's got an education, but he didn't live long. So the next kid was Thomas. And Thomas was the chemistry professor at Davidson College in North Carolina. Yeah. Then the next one was Gordon of Savannah, Georgia, a graduate of Emory. He served for 3 years as the physical education trainer for European theater during World War II. And he was the city recreation department director at Savannah and the football coach at Thomas Arnold High School. And he moved to Tucson, Arizona, where he retired. All right. The next child was Alan, and he lived in Homestead, Florida, and he was a medical doctor. The next kid was Margaret, and she lived in Elberton, Georgia. She had married Charles Fortson Herndon, a doctor of dental surgery in Florida. And so that's his kids. See, they all got an education, and John Gordon Logan died in 1939 at Emory Hospital, and he was buried in Alta Vista Cemetery, the big cemetery in Gainesville, and that's where the kid that died in Greece was shipped to for burial too. Okay, so I'm proud of John Gordon Logan. I'm proud of Young Harris. I mean, they really rescued that kid.
So next on the list, we have Francis Marion Bartow Lockaby, and he's pictured there with his wife Ava. And he was born March the 27th, 1863 here in Towns County, and they made their home up in the Bell Creek community where they raised their family. Now Bart Lockaby, he was a carpenter by trade, and his handiwork can still be seen sporadically around the county in a few of the remaining older homes and buildings that we still have. He was... I haven't took that far yet.
Okay. Sorry.
His main thing that he was known for was the Victorian-style gingerbread trim. And one key characteristic that most of his homes and buildings always had was a horseshoe design on them somewhere. Some of the buildings that he helped build were the Kitty McConnell Barone Memorial Hall, which was located on Barone Street. This was the first house of Jesse Miles Barone that we just discussed a few minutes ago. The Hooper Hotel, which sat on Main Street at the corner of Main Street and River Street And you see kind of right there, you can see the horseshoe designs up in the gables. The Asbury Eller House, which was known as the House of Seven Gables because of how many gables it had, it set up in the Upper Hightower community. The Dr. Johnson House, which set up on River Street here in Hiwassee. And it had the famous witch's hat on it. The L.C. Brown House, also known as the Cordy Wood House, which is located up on Bell Street. So far out of this list, this is the only one still standing. And it had most of its design and trim taken away around the 1940s when that was considered old and dated. They stripped it all off and put modern stuff for the time on it. The original Unicoi Lodge, which sat at the location of the current Unicoi Lodge here in town in Hiwassee. In my opinion, that one looked 10 times better.
I do too.
And one Jerry didn't put on here was the Rome House.
They saw it while you were talking.
Oh, okay. So yes, the Rome Oakley House was one. So out of that list, there's two of them still standing. So that's another house that he did.
There.
Oh, there it is. The Brown House.
Somebody made that picture and sent it to you.
Oh my gosh. Doug Green.
Who?
Doug Green. Is he here tonight? He's one of our members. No? He lived down below the house. They've moved now, but they took that picture back this winter during the snowfall.
Well, so far, most of those people were born here. But this person wasn't born here, but he got here as quickly as he could. His name was Leon Cleveland McCall, otherwise known as Mac McCall. How many of you remember Mac McCall? I see several hands. Well, they got here as quickly as they could arriving on cold February the 23rd, 1963, at their Mountain Dream home on Ridgecrest Circle. Here, their two children, Dwight and Mary Ann, grew up happy to be adopted mountaineers. Mary Ann doesn't know anything but about being a mountaineer. How old were you, Mary Ann? 2? Okay. So Mac was able to pursue his interest in radio by installing and becoming chief engineer of Valdosta's first radio station, owned by Governor E.D. Rivers. After spending 38 months in the Air Force during World War II as a communications technician, he fulfilled his lifetime dream by building and operating his own radio station, WWPF, in Palatka. In 1958, he moved to Dalton, where he owned and operated WBLJ until 1960. So, when they moved to Towns County, they found that TV reception was slim to none in most parts of the county. I could watch a few programs, mostly the ones I could watch at my neighbor's house was from Chattanooga, Channel 3. And it always would have these commercials, and it would have a peacock with all these feathers, and it would say, brought to you in crystal clear color. I couldn't understand it. It was just blurry black and white. So, Mr. McCall, with his knowledge, and with the encouragement from the Lions Club, and ground help and sweat equity from Jerry Kendall and Clay Dotson, and the Lions Club, they had a transmitter installed on Bell Mountain. And soon we were getting much improved TV reception from Atlanta channels 2, 5, and 11. But as I remember, channel 2 came on channel 7. Thank you. Okay. And channel 5 came on channel 10. And channel 11 came on
13.
Yeah.
And later 17 came on 67 from down Woods Road area.
So
for a while, it was not on too long. Those
Okay.
were on for a long time, those three were. And
So-
it was different, it was different in Young Harris,
Yeah,
had over there. I don't know the numbers of the channels over there.
I don't know, they had their own transmitter over
Yeah, they
there.
did, yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, they couldn't get from this one over there.
So Clay Dodson, Jerry Kendall, Mac McCall, and the encouragement of the Lions Club, they got us where we could see TV, really. So,
What year was that?
I
about,
don't know when.
it's in the
I was
nineteen
the
seventies.
treasurer. I didn't do too much of the work up on the mountains or anything. I did a little bit, but I was the treasurer for
Yeah.
those 30 years.
Well, Mary Ann, what do you remember about it?
I remember when the rainstorm came up, it went off, and our phone started ringing, and so we were getting our four-wheel drive and go up there to thunder and lightning for him to turn it back on. When the Bell Mountains Road was really bad, and I remember him opening up the little, building that was there one time, he saw two rattlesnake skins, and he thought Clay Dodson or somebody was playing a trick on him, but it was really snakes in there shedding their skin.
So all of our men to match the mountains weren't born in the 1800s. Some were born in the 1900s, and here's one that got us TV.
Mac was really great at doing that. He was just absolutely spectacular with how he knew to do all that stuff. I observed a lot of it. He was amazing. He really was.
I would imagine that he spent a great deal of his own money on that project.
What?
I would imagine he financed himself.
He probably did, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, next we have Eugene Nesbitt Nicholson, who is pictured here with his wife Lola, and he was most commonly known as Nick, and or Mr. Nick, and he was born in Rayburn County in 1890, and he received a Bachelor of Science degree in Agriculture from North Georgia College and a Master's degree of Natural Science from the University of Wisconsin. Miss Lola there was born in 1900 in Wichita Falls, Texas, and in early 1922, while visiting friends in Greenville, South Carolina, she met Gene, whom she married on June 28, 1922. Now, he had been employed as a professor at the North Georgia College in Dahlonega, and where she had been serving as the secretary to the president of the college until they both left in 1933. Now, in 1943, Mr. and Mrs. Nick moved up to Hiwassee, where Mr. Nick served as our county agent until he retired in 1958. And during their quarter of a century work here in Towns County, Mr. and Mrs. Nick were instrumental and involved in a number of our community activities. The most prominent one being in 1951, which happened 75 years ago this year, when they planned, organized, and helped put into operation the idea of the Georgia Mountain Fair. Mr. Nick served as the manager and Mrs. Nick as the executive secretary for 12 years. They also helped organize the Centennial Committee in 1956 for the county's centennial celebration. Mr. Nick passed away in Towns County Hospital in 1971, and Mrs. Nick died in 1979. They are buried in Double Springs Methodist Church Cemetery in Walla Walla, South Carolina.
Just another comment. After Mr. Nick died, she moved to Athens, Georgia. At the same time, I was a student at the University of Georgia. And Keith Plott was my roommate. And he knew Miss Nick somehow. And she knew me. And she would call and invite us to supper. And I don't mean it was a hamburger. It was real fried chicken and gravy and biscuits and all that stuff. So it made living in Athens in the dorm enjoyable. Okay. All right. The next man to match the mountains is James Lafayette Hooper, Sr. You'll probably already realize that this is about Hooper's Drugstore. That's the picture of Hooper's Drugstore in 1929. The drugstore during its history has been on all four sides of the square. It's been on the Glen Eller side, it's been on the old post office side. This is when it was on the Hooper lot over there. And this building had 2 stores in it. They called the building the double barrel building. And then it moved over there where the dental practice is. And that's where most of you, well, I'd say all of you, if you remember it at. Okay, next picture. Okay, so Mr. Hooper was born in 1881 in Towns County, and he got his education at Hiawassee Academy. Hiawassee Academy must have been a really good school, because people that came out of that amounted to something, here and abroad. He then went to the Atlanta College of Pharmacy and was licensed in Georgia, and he began his practice at Cornelia. And he married Eleanor Barrett of Nacoochee Valley. I think she had been a student at Hiawassee Academy too. And they eventually returned to Hiawassee and opened up a Hooper's Drug Store, which, as far as I know, at that time was the oldest business in Hiawassee. The bank was about 1909 or so. So the drugstore and the bank were the oldest businesses that continued on for a number of years here. The drugstore that we know of as Hooper's Drugstore was last owned by Charles Nicholson, and that was the drugstore, and was sold and moved over there where, what is that, Walgreens?
Well, where Dr. Edwards' office is, I built there in '79,
Okay.
across from the hospital.
The drugstore had ice cream cones and fountain drinks and stuff, and it was often a respite for high schoolers that could get away during school hours. In connection with his business, besides prescriptions, Mr. Hooper installed the first gasoline pump for the owners of the puddle jumpers here. He sold the first bottled soft drinks. He installed the first fountain drinks. He had the first fluorescent lights. He had the first neon sign. He also sold the first bananas. And bananas back then came on big stalks. Okay. So he sold the first bananas. That's the first time people here knew what bananas were. He was a partner in the first city water system. He was a member of the building committee for the original McConnell Memorial Church. And he was on the building committee for the first hospital, the Liam Howe Memorial Hospital. So he's quite an entrepreneur, quite a businessman, and that was James Lafayette Hooper. And he died in 1954, and he and his wife are buried in Osborn Cemetery.
And I remember it as a fine Christian gentleman.
Yes.
And next we have the Reverend Samuel Young James IV, who was born October 1st, 1859, here in the Macedonia community of Towns County. And from the ages of 5 to 15, he was kept in school continuously. Morgan Seminary in Walhalla, South Carolina, Higgs Academy, Hayesville, North Carolina, Newberry College at Walhalla, South Carolina. And upon leaving Newberry College in 1875, he went to Westminster, South Carolina, where he was stationed on the newly built Southern Railway and became a merchant on his own account. At the age of 18, Mr. Jameson then went on and was converted and joined the church. He left his business in 1880 in order to attend Furman University, where in 1882 he was ordained to work in the gospel ministry by the Old Westminster Baptist Church, Westminster, South Carolina. He would then go on to spend 2 years in the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary at Louisville, Kentucky, after which he was called to the various pastorates, including Williamson, South Carolina, Toccoa, Georgia, West End Church in Atlanta, corresponding secretary and treasurer of the mission board of the Georgia Baptist Convention. And in 1906, he was called to the presidency of Mercer University in Macon, Georgia. He was the head of the institution for 7 years until 1916, when he was called to the presidency of, I cannot say that word,
I'm not sure. Ouchita.
college in Arkadelphia, Arkansas, somewhere out in Arkansas.
Wachita.
How'd you say it?
Wachita.
Wachita College out in
Arkadelphia.
Arkadelphia, Arkansas. Oh, I'm from the mountains. I can't pronounce these 10-cent words. He resigned the presidency of the institution to become pastor of the First Baptist Church, Marietta, Georgia. Under his leadership as the corresponding secretary and treasurer of the mission board, the receipts of the board for all causes increased steadily year by year, and during his administration, much constructive mission work was done in the state, and Georgia led all her sister states in gifts to home and foreign missions. And as president of Mercer University, he was able to raise $225,000 for the badly needed equipment and further endowment, as well as greatly increasing the number of students. Of him, Judge Thomas G. Lawson said, under his administration, the college had prospered as it had never happened before. And then Dr. Jameson passed away in 1921 at his residence, number 111th Street in Atlanta, after a brief illness, and is buried in the Westview Cemetery in Atlanta.
The next one was Alfred E. Corn, and he was known locally as Papa Corn, Pappy Corn, and sometimes Popcorn. I'm not joking. He was the son of a pioneer settler here, Reverend Adam Corn, who's buried at Lower Bell Creek. And he and his brother John joined the church at Macedonia and were baptized by their own father, like about 1850. I don't know when 18. During his years of his ministerial life, Alfred was a faithful and laborious missionary under appointment of the Hiawassee Baptist Association and the Domestic and Indian Mission Board of the Southern Baptist Convention, and lastly of the State Board of the Georgia Baptist Convention. A large part of his ministry was expanded among the Cherokees of western North Carolina and northeastern Georgia, to whom he preached through an interpreter, and many of whom were converted. Now, what's that highest mountain in Georgia? Grasstown Bog. It's not either. Pappy Corn told Professor E.L. Adams at Young Harris, who told me that from the Indians, its name is Enota, meaning bald place crowned in laurel. I wish the Forest Service hadn't changed its name. At least the word Enota hasn't been lost to the area. You been to court lately? That judge is from what circuit? Enota Circuit. Right out here used to be a Noda restaurant and a Noda motel. The new apartments in Young Harris are the Enota apartments. There's a realty in Blairsville, Enota Realty. On Fodder Creek is Enota Baptist Church. The college newspaper is the Enota Echoes. And there's probably a lot more Enotas that I can't think of right now. But so thank goodness that the word Enota is not gone. But I wish it's still Enota bald. So Pappy Corn kept a diary of sorts. And I just want to read you some from his diary during the Civil War time. At February 1864, Wednesday the 3rd, had the pleasure of meeting my only son, whose return from a long absence, peril, and suffering in the war gave a deep and happy impression on the occasion, and at the hour of prayer a thank offering was presented at the family altar, our family all being present to participate in the solemn ceremonies. Friday the 19th. failed to attend the general meeting at Pleasant Grove by reason of the invasion of the country by Yankee troops. Sabbath the 21st. Rose early and hastened to look after my horses, and to my astonishment, a vain fool and a sneaking stoop had stolen them away, and I was destitute of a horse. Faithful old horse that had drawn me so many thousand miles was gone, and worse than all, he was ridden off by a rogue. You feel him? March the 9th, 1864, a memorable day. This day saw my dear children together for the last time, and this life separated from home and friends by reason of the cruel war. In addition, he was also a poet of sorts, and I want to read you one of his poets. I'd say it's about himself. It's named The Missionary. A weary pilgrim here I roam, sometimes in sorrow, then in song, sometimes beneath the burning sun, and then anon in a snowy storm. Sometimes I climb the mountain high and mingle with the cloudy sky, then plunge again into the valley deep to seek and feed my Father's sheep. That sounds better than preaching, doesn't it? Feeding my Father's sheep. I feed them with the Word of God and point them to my Savior's blood, baptizing them in Jesus' name, the Jew and Gentile all the same. I love to feed my Father's sheep. I love the tender lambs to keep. I love to see them live in love while on their way to heaven above. Sounds like a perfect church, doesn't it? They hear with joy the shepherd's voice. They've surely made a happy choice. All in one fold they dwell complete while resting near the mercy seat. Now hear the sequel of my song. I know on earth I'll not be long. My work will soon be done below, and then to glory I will go. Pappy Corn.
I don't know how to follow that up. That should have been last. So next we have Colonel Sumner Joel Smith. In the Constitution, Atlanta, 25th of April, 1869, wrote the death of Colonel Sumner J. Smith. We regret to learn that this able and esteemed gentleman died at his residence in Banks County last Saturday. He had been in bad health for some time. Colonel Smith was a man of fine ability and exalted personal worth. He served in the Georgia legislature about year 1859 from Towns County and was a leader in the debates of that term. He was ardently devoted to the case of the Confederacy and raised a regiment early in the war. His health failed and he was returned home, where he has led a life of close retirement ever since. Athens Banner. His parents were married in Troy, New York in 1815, and his family moved to Greenville, Tennessee about 1819. And then they moved to Towns County in the mid-1950s, where they were supportive of the Confederate cause. Now, he was elected colonel of the Smith's Legion, Georgia Volunteers on May 21st, 1862, and then transferred to the 65th Regiment, Georgia Infantry, March 1863. He tendered his resignation March 9, 1863, and it was accepted in April 27, 1863. During that time period, all the Smith family moved to the Banks County area, presumably due to the anti-Confederacy sentiment in the local Towns County area. There he died April 18, 1869, where he is buried in the Hebron Presbyterian Cemetery.
I had to include him. He's really important during that Confederate time, and it was very well known. Any Confederate soldier that you look up their record, they were in Sumner Smith's Legion. So many little boys around here were named after him, whether they became Sumner or Summy or Sum or Jewel or Joel. They're all named after Sumner J. Smith that nobody has a clue about today, except you. How many recognize this guy? Well, Frank Abernathy, as I said, they weren't all born in the 1800s. He was born in 1910. And he was born in Polk County, Tennessee, Copper Hill. And he was born into a family of morticians and furniture salesmen. What does that got to go together? But it always went together. He married a young Harris girl, Eula George Cook, in 1935 in Polk County, Tennessee, where she had gone to work in a store. Well, she convinced him to move to Young Harris, and by 1940, they were living in Young Harris, and his occupation on the census is selling electrical appliances. Now, the lake was not, the dam was built in 1941. The lake was filled in 1942. He was selling electrical appliances before that. I guess people could read the future, or he convinced them it was really going to happen. Yeah, people had their washing machine on the back porch before they could plug it in. So he was quite a salesman. He soon added the mortician services to his furniture business. A real entrepreneur, he added gimmick after gimmick for sensational advertising. One of the biggest things that people remember is the Christmas party. You remember that? The Christmas giveaway. You go and you might win a refrigerator or who knows what. In addition to the Christmas party, turn it up. Okay, the funeral home. This is a Christmas party about 1956. There's the traffic jam in Midtown Jacksonville. It's worse than with them building the highway now. So there you go. Along with the Christmas party, a Christmas party wouldn't be complete without reindeer. He had the reindeer park. And so as for selling stuff, nobody had money to buy anything. But his gimmick was, go ahead, you marry the girl. We will furnish the home. She trusted you, so will we. Feather your nest with a little down. Get it? A little down. And so there's Frank Abernathy.
And I think last, but certainly not least, we have Dr. Joseph Astor Sharp, who was born in 1864 and graduated from Emory at Oxford in 1892. He served as the president of Young Harris College for over 25 years and was active in ministering to the members of the congregation during his tenures at Young Harris College. He was a dedicated and attentive man who inspired many of the generations of students at the college, and he left a lasting impression on the church congregation and the community. He died in 1930, and he is buried at the Old Union Cemetery in his beloved Young Harris. On May 29, 1949, Sharp Memorial Methodist Church was dedicated by Bishop Arthur J. Moore with over 750 people in attendance. Today, Sharp Memorial stands at the entrance to Young Harris College in honor of Dr. Joseph A. Sharp. So, you got one more.
And last but not least is Joseph Snyder. Now, the first time I ever heard of old Joe Snyder, my grandmother talked about old Joe Snyder. He was just a tramp. He was just tramping around, which means he is homeless. However, on the 1900 census, he was still enough to be caught on the census, living in the home of William Bud Hedden. And he's listed as a boarder. And so anyhow, the story I want to conclude with, they all weren't rich and famous. They weren't all preachers and teachers and doctors and lawyers and stuff. There was old Joe Snyder who was just tramping about. So at that time, the Baptist church was about where the tag office is on River Street. And the Hiawassee Academy was like over where England Garden Club is. So, old Joe Snyder really didn't have a place, even though they caught him stealing that hidden house in 1900 to be on the census. He would go to the church and climb up in the loft of the church, which the boards weren't nailed down, they were loose. And so he would just take his naps and sleep up there in the loft of the church. And so one time the church was having a big revival. I mean, big revival. You know, where they get in the spirit. And so some lady got to shouting, "I see my Jesus! I see my Jesus!" Well, it was loud and strong enough to wake up poor old Joe Snyder, who peeped down through a crack where the boards weren't nailed down. And he said, "No, it's just me, old Joe Snyder."